Hello, everybody. A few weeks ago, I went to my favorite cinema in San Francisco, the Alamo, to see one of my favorite films, or re-see it, Devil in a Blue Dress. We've all seen it. Wonderful movie, featuring Denzel Washington, of course, a 1995 movie. But we wouldn't have the movie without the book. It's the 1990 book, Devil in a Blue Dress, by the great American crime writer. I'm not sure if that's the best way to describe him. We'll ask Walter Mosley, who invented Easy Rawlins. And I'm thrilled and honored that Walter Mosley is joining us today. He's here to talk about his latest novel, Been Wrong So Long, It Feels Like Right, a King Oliver novel. But since I've got him, since I've got you, Walter, let's begin with Easy Rawlins and that wonderful film, Devil in a Blue Dress. Was it strange when you first saw that film? What was it like as the creator of Easy Rawlins?
Well, it's interesting, because if anybody ever asks me what I am, I'll say I'm a novelist. That's period. That's all I say. And and back then that was new for me, the book, but the movie. But I've never really been all that distracted by film of my work, whether I've written that or not, and so I will say that the first day I was ever on the set was also the first day that Don Cheadle was on the set, as Mouse, and he was like all dressed up as Mouse, and he had everything, and when I saw him, it was really amazing to me. I said, "Wow, that is Mouse right there." I didn't look anything like the Mouse in the book, but that's Mouse right there, and I loved it. I just loved it. It was great, and I was really moved by it. But I write books. I tell stories through black letters on white pages. I mean, that's what I do.
Walter, you were born in LA. You're very much of an LA writer. You're talking to us from New York. I know you divide your time now between Los Angeles, the beach, and Brooklyn. But I think it's possible to be an LA writer growing up there in the middle of the 20th century and not write cinematically?
Well, I don't think that anybody in America can write without being cinematic. I mean, I guess some people can, but most people, television, they have a television, at least one in their house, if not many. And the language of cinema, the language of film, informs all of us. I think if you look at the different ways that books are written, if you look at a book like Moby Dick, when he's explaining to you all the minute details of a whaling ship, and today it's just, you can't do that. Nobody's going to read that. Nobody's going to publish it. Nobody's going to do anything with it. And it's a great book. Don't get me wrong. But our language has changed. Our communication has changed along with our I would say dependence on film for information. Yeah.
You're Walter. You're a prolific writer. A lot of people are described as prolific. You are truly prolific. I've heard that you haven't had a day without writing since you picked up the pen earlier in your life. Your books are divided into different kinds of mysteries, dominated by, I guess, the detective. There's, of course, the Easy Rawlins ones, the Fearless Jones mysteries, the Leonard McGill mysteries, and then the King Oliver mysteries that we're going to talk about today. In your mind, when you think about your output, your creativity, do you think in those terms when you think of a book? Do you think that was an Easy Rawlins book, that was a Fearless Jones book?
Yeah, if I write a book about Easy solving some case, certainly I think that's an Easy Rawlins, not even book, but mystery. Those books, I think about 45% of my books have been mysteries, and then the rest of the books have been something else.
So tell me about the guy at the heart of Being Wrong So Long. It feels like right. It's described as a King Oliver novel. Who is King Oliver? How is he different from Easy Rawlins?
Well, to begin with, he's in the present day. Easy Rawlins. I just finished the newest Easy Rawlins book, and he's in 1972. Easy starts in 19, I think 36 or 39, 39, I think, with Gone Fishing. It's the first book I wrote about Easy, and then to 48, and then all the way up to 72. Joe Oliver's he's a contemporary. He's here today, living life, and dealing with a very different America than Easy had to deal with.
So the follow-up, of course, is firstly, what kind of America is that? Why is it different from Easy's America?
Well, Easy's life was very much black and white, and to give you an idea of how that would have to do with nationality. Well, my father, my father, I loved him, and I would ask him questions all the time about his experiences. And I said, "Dad, you were in World War II?" And he goes, "Yes." And he says, and I said, "So, were you afraid to be there in a war?" And he said, "No, I wasn't afraid at all, not at first." And I said, "Why not?" And he said, "Well, because I thought it was the Americans against the Germans." And I said, "It was." He said, "Yes, but I had no idea that I was an American. I thought if the Germans said where are the American soldiers, I just pointed at the white guys and said they're over there." And he said, I learned that I was American because the Germans were shooting at me.
Remind me about your father, because not everyone's going to be familiar with your father.
Yeah, well, he's my dad. He was born in New Iberia, Louisiana. His mother died when he was 7. His father died when he was 8. He jumped a boxcar at the age of 8 and came to Fifth Ward, Houston, Texas, where he walked around until he found his mother's father there. The mother's father said to him, "Okay, you're my grandson, so you can sleep on the porch, but I'm not going to feed you." That was his life. He lived there in that kind of life until finally he went to the war in 1942, 43. I'm not sure which.
So Easy was, though, the son of this man. What does that tell us about Easy himself?
Well, Easy's story, it spans the 15, 16 novels that I've written about him. And it would be hard for me to say he was a man born black in America, which meant that he spent a good 20% of his time being questioned about why he was someplace, why he wasn't someplace else, what he had done, what he might have done, from everybody, from the people in the bank to the people in the gas station to the police that stop him going down the street. He had a life where mostly in Los Angeles as an adult, where he had to deal. His race was the first and often the only thing that people noticed about him. And even though they noticed it, they didn't really understand what they were seeing.
And then how is then Oliver different? You say he's contemporary?
Yeah, Joe Oliver's contemporary. He's in New York, not Los Angeles, but there's still race and racism and all this other stuff, but the separation of the races, the amount of time spent concentrating on racial issues, though not gone, are not nearly as much as they were then. He deals with, he could have somebody come into his office who's like a white guy who says, I got some trouble. Some people have been robbing my warehouse. I need somebody to take care of this. In 1948, they're never going to hire a black detective for something like that. They wouldn't even believe that there is a black detective. When I wrote the book, it was even in 1990, when I wrote the first Easy Rawlins, I was told by one publisher, well, there already is a black detective. and I said to him, I said, well, there's a lot of white detectives. And he said, I don't get what you mean.
Well, you're not going to mention his name, are you?
Mm-mm.
What is that experience, the Easy Rawlins or the Oliver experience? How does that shape a detective? What does that mean in terms of thinking about other people's crimes?
Well, in Easy's case, uh, nobody will expect him to be a detective. Nobody thinks that no white people, no black people. He walks in the room and says, "Well, that's another Negro." Negroes, aren't detectives. Uh, they couldn't be one. They wouldn't be one. They wouldn't be hired as one. They would never even think of themselves as one. That kind of thing. Um, Now, Joe Oliver had a lot of trouble with his father, because the father went to prison, and Joe thinks it was his fault, and the mother died of a broken heart not long after that, uh, and he, because of that experience, became a policeman, kind of like against what his father had been, or what he thought his father had been, and his whole entree into the world of being a detective is from him at one time being a policeman. He understands the job, actually, in ways that other people don't.
You talk about this guy as if he's real. Clearly, in your head, he's real. Maybe for many of your readers. Do they have to, a Joe Oliver or an Easy Rawlins, do they have to be real to write about them well?
I think that I'm going to spend a lot of time thinking about this, but I think that writing, in a way, is a performance. It's a private performance. I mean, you do it for yourself. You're not doing it for an audience when you're literally writing. But you have to believe in what you're writing in order to breathe life into it. And I think it's the same as an actor. If an actor is going to take on a role, in a screenplay or in a play, they have to believe in that character. They have to believe in what they're saying. If they don't, the language dries up, blows away.
I know this is a dumb question, Walter. You've probably heard every question before a million times, but are some of these guys, and particularly Oliver, King Oliver, are they based on real people? Do you, when you go around, when you have dinners with people, when you go on the planes, or you walk around New York or Los Angeles, do you look at people and think, wow, I'm going to take some notes on that person. Maybe they can be one of my detectives?
Yeah, it's such a hard question to answer. All of my characters are based on people either I've known, I've met, or I've wanted to know or meet. But they aren't those characters. In the same breath, they aren't those characters. They become when I'm writing about them, they become themselves. In my imagination.
Do you think the fact that you were an only child and quite isolated, left on your own in some ways, I'm assuming that must have ultimately, it may not have always been a lot of fun, but it helped you ultimately as a writer, because it forced your imagination?
I can't say that for a fact, because I really don't know, but it does seem like that's true. I was an only child, living in South Central Los Angeles, with both parents, going to, when I was there, I went to this Baptist school in LA. So a private school. It was a private school, but it only cost $10 a week to go there. And it was great. I mean, and when I was alone, yeah, I had my, but not only was I an only child, my mother had been an only child. My father was an orphan. So there wasn't a whole bunch of, sociality among us. And each one of us spent a lot of time alone. And I had a room that had a door that I could close it. I had a television, I just, and I just made up my own stories. So I think you're probably right.
Although you were sort of doubly complicated. I mean, your father is African American, your mother's Jewish, so you had an added mixture to sort of complicate things with your relations with the outside world, or is that the wrong way of putting it?
Well, you know, I think that's true, but I think it's true for millions of Americans. And I'm working on a television show right now with the writer uh, and the director Sterling Harjo, who did his last show was the television Reservation Dogs. Um,
Mm.
and I went out there, with some of the other writers of the show to Tulsa, and there's so many people in Tulsa who are part native. You know what I mean? It's so many. It's just, that might even be the majority of people. Uh, so a lot of us have that multicultural backgrounds, um, either in religion or in race or in nationality, whatever. And so, yeah, I but I have taken on what my parents gave me.
So tell us about the new novel, Walter.
Hmm.
We don't want you to obviously give away everything because we want people to buy it. It's a King Oliver novel. Been wrong so long it feels like right. What can you tell us that will encourage people to read it rather than say, "Oh, I know all about this now. I'm not going to bother to go out and get it."
Well, if anything you write, if you write it well enough, you could tell somebody the whole story, and they still wouldn't get it until they read it. But I won't do that. I mean, this is a novel that has two stories. It has an A side and a B side. The B side is there's a woman that Joe has been hired to find through an NYPD police dispatcher who, and, figured he could make some money because this guy didn't want to go to the police. His wife ran away with their daughter, and this guy wants to find him. The guy lives in Santa Barbara, California, and Joe is in New York. Um, Joe has been willing to look for her, and he managed to find her. And while in the first chapter, when he's talking to her, he realizes that he might have jumped the gun taking this case from his friend, this police sergeant friend, because the police sergeant friend has really no morality. He doesn't care why the guy wants to find his wife, his runaway wife. But Joe realizes that she might be in danger, and so he takes on an opposite aspect of the case. That's the B side. The A side is that he comes back to his office after that, and his 94-year-old grandmother, black woman from Tennessee and Mississippi, is so, she's 94 years old, uh, black woman, comes from that severe South, uh, and she's hooked up with the richest man in the world. Literally, she lives with the richest man in the world, and she's there to talk to Joe, and Joe's saying, "Well, what do you need, Grandma?" And she says, "Look, I have a tumor between my heart and my lungs. It could be cancer. I need to deal with it, but what I need from you is to find your father." And he says, "Well, Dad's in prison, Grandma. Just go see him." And she said, "No, they let him out 9 years ago. He never told anybody. And I need to find him. I need to speak to my son before I die. And you need to speak to your father." And so he goes out on this case, looking for a man that he feels like he hates, but probably he doesn't. And he has to discover everything about the life that he missed in order to bring his father to his grandmother. The police are after him again, and there's some other issues going on, and so that's those two stories are how he makes his way uh, through this novel, and the end of the novel is a complete surprise, which you know
You
I
don't want
mean,
to give that one up, but there's
no.
something then, in a sense, rather sad about King Oliver, and he never really knew his father.
Yeah, well, he knew him a little, and he learned a lot from him in the time that he knew him, because his father went to prison when he was 13. So he knew his dad, but he wanted more, of course. But that doesn't mean that his father didn't give him everything he could, which he probably did. Their relationship is, it's always going to be somewhat strained, but he loves his dad, and yeah, there's a lot of sadness in life.
Walter, we've done a lot of shows on the American criminal justice system, done shows on what's called second Jim Crow and the enormous inequities, racial inequities within the American justice system, the fact that so many young black men go to jail. Is there a commentary in this? Is there some politics or sociology in this book, or do you steer clear of that?
Well, no, I don't. If I speak about the life of specific Black Americans, I mean, I'm not going to try to say I'm covering everything. I'm not covering most of religion. I'm not talking about capitalism straightforward, though you can't avoid doing that in America. But I am talking about what Black life is like. What I try to do is voice the experience of these characters that I think echo throughout a lot of Americans, but certainly African Americans are gonna hear this language and see these lives and understand. Yeah, that's what happened to me. That's what my life is like. But a lot of white people are going to say it too, which is kind of wonderful.
Well, not that many. I mean, I don't know if it's wonderful for them, but the disparity still between the amount of black men who go to jail relatively, given the populations, and white men is astonishing, isn't it?
No, it is. It is. And that's, that it's, but I'll talk, well, because I have never been to prison, and because a lot of people do write about it. I don't concentrate on prison, except once when I wrote my stories about Socrates Fortlow, who had spent 29 years in prison. But what I talk about is the life that kind of tries to force us into that. That's the thing that, because it's a very important thing to understand, and a lot of people do, and a lot of people come to that pretty late. That we're treated differently, but I mean, the Black experience is really, in many ways, the true neo-American experience. When after Columbus. And
what do you mean neo-American?
Well, because the Native Americans, so-called Native Americans, have been here, for at least 1,500 years, if not longer, and they're the first. They're the first wave of human beings to come here, and that's. So I'm not talking about that, but when Black people came here, they dealt with all of what's difficult about survival in America from the beginning until today. And talking about that, I can talk to. So that's when I'm saying, and others, I talk to Black people about that who understand where we're coming from, and white people who I mean, not everybody understands it, but a lot of them are capable of understanding.
Do you think, though, that you said you don't write about prison, but prison is the backdrop to this new King Oliver novel?
Yeah,
prison is the next chapter in the history of, if not slavery, certainly Jim Crow America.
No, it's certainly true. Yeah. So and I mean, the prison experience in America is, I mean, you have to start with just the basic thing. We have more prisoners than anybody. We have more people in prison than China has in prison, even though they have 4 times the population. Well, maybe three times the population. And it's amazing how people become criminalized in America, and certainly poor people do, and Black people do even more because of a long-standing racial prejudice against Black people. That's a fact,
And what does that tell us then about America?
What do you mean? What you mean that the country is racist?
Yeah,
the country is founded on racism. Well, I mean,
Well, that it continues. I mean, you made the point earlier that there's quite
how
a lot
would
of
it?
difference between Easy Rawlins and King Oliver, but America kind of stays the same, doesn't it?
No, no. It does, I mean, because the black experience has changed drastically. That doesn't mean that there still aren't, tons of black people being sent to prison. But to say one thing, one statement doesn't negate the other. Yes, prison is still a large part of the experience of Black America. But to say that nothing has changed for Black people would not allow us to be able to see how to make things different. And I think a lot has changed. I mean, you just look at the number of people being published. You just look at who has been president. I mean, things have changed. The problems, many of the problems are still there, and sometimes in some ways worse. But
I
that
want to
doesn't
turn this
mean,
into another Trump conversation because it gets a bit boring. But
yeah, yeah.
is he a return, Walter, to the old America?
I
Some
think
people think he
that
is.
he's very, very astutely judged uh, who is going to vote for him and who isn't, and has figured out what lies to tell those people in order to get done what he needs to get done, which is a whole other level of trouble in America, which is the growing oligarchy.
We talked about the cinematic quality. There was, of course, a Joseph Nathan King Oliver, a very famous African American jazz player.
Yeah.
Did you borrow? I mean, it seems more than coincidental in terms of King Oliver's name. And do you try to give your work? I'm not entirely sure what this means, but a musical quality.
Well, listen, poetry is the heart of writing, and it's also the heart of music, lyric and song. So I think that in order to write a story, anything that's written has to be somewhat musical. That's just on its own, without talking about musical form. But Joe's father, who Chief Oliver. I mean, he he loved his son so much he wanted to name him after a great American. And Joe King Oliver was the mentor of the heart of jazz, which is Louis Armstrong. And Joe loves jazz. Joe, which means that Joe loves his father, but that's something different. Joe loves jazz, and and jazz has kept him alive. And maybe when he was young, it was the old guys who sang to your who played to your heart, and then later on it's people like Thelonious Monk and Bird who play more to your experience. And I think that it's just really yeah, certainly. So jazz has a lot to do with Joe Oliver's existence. I think my first published novel, Devil in a Blue Dress, is certainly what one would call a jazz novel.
I'm sure you saw it. There was a wonderful piece in the New York Times last year on how Easy Rawlins built a real estate empire, one crime novel at a time, and suggested that there's a lot of real world lessons we can learn from the fictional character of Easy Rawlins. What are the real world lessons about King Oliver?
Well, I mean, part of your question about the prison system itself is what Joe is dealing with, because it's not just the prison system. It has to be the legal system. It has to be the executive branch, the police who enforce laws without kind of equality, without even-handedness. Joe was a policeman. And the problem he came across was he was too good at being a policeman. When he figured out that his bosses were running a drug operation, he he just simply said, "Okay, fine. Uh, I'm going to work against them." And then he realized, "Oh, right, there is no working against the system. You know, you work against the system, you probably die, and if you don't die, you're going to lose everything." And that's really that's what Joe is always working for. He says, what is right and what is wrong in the system? What is good and what is evil in the system? In Easy's world, it's always black and white, black people and white people. It's, there's not, there's not much entree for white people into that world. But in Joe's world, there's all kinds of people. There's his good friend Melquarth Frost, who's really he's committed every crime that exists, and it's only now that he's trying to be better. But he's still, if Joe needs help, he say, "Well, you need me to kill somebody?" He'll do it, no problem.
Yeah, there always seems there's a lot of examples in crime literature that detectives could always make good criminals, and good criminals could always make, or bad criminals could always make good detectives. What else could King Oliver, though, have been? What are the other professions that are kind of connected to being a detective? Perhaps the church, is that too much of a moral business, or maybe an immoral business?
Well, when you say the church, I mean, anybody can go to work for the church. I mean, but to be a detective, but you're not saying to be a detective. He was a policeman, and then you're saying could he go to the church? I guess he could, but I guess maybe in Catholicism they would have some role for him dealing with crime. But I don't think he would do anything like that. I mean, Joe could do anything. He's a really smart guy, but I think that he was wounded by his father's experience, and that was the criminal. He thought he would go the other way, but he ended up back where his dealing with crime much more closely as his father did. Because his father wasn't a criminal really. He did what he thought was right, and in America, if you do what you think is right, you're often going to cross laws.
Finally, Walter, this is a fathers and son book about complicated, always, and particularly complicated relationship between fathers and sons. I'm not sure if you've read about this, but there seems to be a new fashion amongst young people to, so to speak, divorce their parents, to say, well, my parents did this or that, didn't treat me properly, they abandoned me, they exploited me, they took advantage of me, and I'm going to choose to spend the rest of my life disassociating from them. What does this novel tell us? What would it tell us about that kind of thinking? How essential is recognizing everything about one's parent, the good and the bad?
I mean, it's essential if indeed it's in your heart, right? That's where it comes from. Because a lot of people just grow away from their parents, have no real interest in them. But in this case, this is a thing. Joe, when Joe's mother died and father went away to prison, he was raised by his grandparents, and he learned everything from them, and he loved them, And so when his grandmother comes to him and says, "Look, I need to talk to my son, and I hear you're really good at finding people, so I need you to go out there and find your father." In a way, it's a kind of one of those old Greek theater kind of tasks that somebody gets set upon, and where does it end up? I don't know, and I mean, I know in this case, Joe and his father, have a kind of peace between them, and respect. And I like that. But I mean, something else could have happened. I know people whose parents have been so awful to them that they had to separate them from them for their own safety. So I mean, it really depends. It's not. It's only general when you look at thousands of cases, but each one at a time has its own life, its own meaning.
Finally, Walter, you mentioned you're working on another Easy book.
Mhm.
Is this the end of the line for King Oliver, or are we going to get some more books on him too?
Oh no, I'm in the middle of writing the fourth King Oliver. Yeah, he's back at it.
How long
And
do these books take?
well, I can write maybe 2.5 books a year. I mean, I could do more, but right now I'm like, I'm
You
doing
probably
work.
make most writers feel terrible. How do you manage to do that and have a life?
Well, I mean, life is work, right? I mean, most of your life is going to be work anyway. So that's okay. I I write every day. That's the foundational
How
thing. I
many
write
hours a day normally?
only three, maybe 3.5. Um, and but if you do it every day, that's you get a lot of words down. So I can probably get through 3 whole novels. I've been doing a lot of work in television and film lately, so some of my time is distracted, but I can still do 2 books a year with no problem.
And what happens to the half book you write?
Well, then and go into if you say 2 years, then that's 5 books, right?
Well, Walter Mosley, real honor, privilege to talk. Congratulations on the new book, Been Wrong So Long, It Feels Like Right, a King Oliver novel, your third. You're already working on the fourth. Best of luck with the book, Walter, and we'll get you back on for the next easy. When's the next easy one out?
The next one's out in about 10 months from now. That's also done. It's called Gray Dawn.
Okay, we'll have to
Yeah.
get you back on the show to talk about that.